Wilde is an incredible film. It's one of my favorite films. What type of preparation did you do for the role? Because the first time I watched the film, I really thought I was watching Oscar Wilde.
That's very marvellous of you. It's a strange thing, acting, and one doesn't want to get too pretentious about it. But above all, film acting is technical. So yes, you read everything you can about the man, and I had already been fascinated by him since I was a child, and I had read every biography I could come across, as well, of course, as his great letter to Posi de Profundis and many other things, and biographies of his mother and of his friends, and all kinds of things. But I remember it was in the second week of filming. In the morning, we did a scene in which Wilde is on a treadmill. He's in prison, and he is, at that point, his reputation is probably the lowest of any human being in the civilized world. He is regarded with absolute contempt and disgust, and he believes that he will be regarded with contempt and disgust for eternity. And he is in a prison. He is put to hard labour for 2 years. The judge told him...
And this was being gay.
This was being gay, exactly. Not with underage children, not with anything like that. And bizarrely, the same judge the week before had sentenced 2 child murderers to death. And the same judge said of the Wilde trial, "This is the worst case I have ever heard." Quite extraordinary. I will give you the full sentence the law allows, which in my opinion is not nearly enough. You want to be put to hard labour for 2 years. And his solicitor said, "I'm afraid, Mr. Wilde, people of your class are not expected to survive a 2-year hard labour punishment," which included the punishment wheel, which is simply a treadmill. It's not as if they used it for, drying, washing, or powering anything. It was purely a punishment wheel. A horrific thing. So I did that scene in the morning, and in the afternoon, in the same studio, as these were on sound stages, I did the scene where Wilde has been let down in a bucket into a silver mine in Leadville, Colorado. And when Wilde was sent by Richard Doyle Cart, who ran the Gilbert and Sullivan Company, sent to America because Gilbert and Sullivan had written this operetta called Patience, which took, made fun of Oscar Wilde and Reggie and Turner and I don't mean Turner, I mean Whistler, and the aesthetic set in London. Wilde at this time had not written a single play or book. He was an editor, but he was famous for the way he dressed and for the way he spoke. He'd already been interviewed as an undergraduate at Oxford and asked what his ambition was, and he had said it was to live up to his collection of blue and white china. So he was known to be a wit, and he was known to be extraordinary, and so Gilbert and Sullivan thought this was the right for sending out this kind of people. But Doyle Cart realised there was no point putting on Patience in America, because in America no one had heard of Oscar Wilde or the Oscar Wilde set, or this extraordinary group of aesthetic young people who said that everything was all too utterly utter. So he paid Oscar a whopping fee, the equivalent of at least $1.5 million in today's money, to do a lecture tour of America, so that all the Americans would get to know him, and that they would do press conferences, and he would wear his velvet trousers and his silk, and be at his with a huge lily, and be at his most extraordinary. And he could choose the lecture subjects. He chose 2 subjects that he gave lectures on. One was Benvenuto Cellini, the Renaissance silversmith, and the other was what he called the House Beautiful, which is probably the first time anybody has ever given lectures on interior decoration. He had a famous white room in his house in Chelsea, and he was a real master of that sort of thing. But the lectures, it's just to give them their title seems silly, but when he was in Leadville, which is the sound Leadville, just already, thank God, but at least it was a silver mine, oddly, not a lead mine, he had given his lecture in the afternoon, and the next day, one of them said, "Did you want to come down to the mine?" Because he'd talked about Cellini and his extraordinary gold and silver craftsmanship. He said, "I think it would be a pleasure." So in this scene, I was lowered down a bucket into a mine where I talked to these miners, and I tell them about Cellini, and they were just with wonder, and I talk about how tragic it is that this beautiful, beautiful metal that we were taking from the rock, instead of being turned into something lovely, was going to be turned into ugly dollars. And they say, "Well, where is this Cellini guy?" And Wilde said, "Well, alas, he is dead." And one of them said, "Who shot him?" So that was the second scene I did that day. So when I go home, which Wilde do I take home? Do I take home the man broken on a wheel? Or do I take home a man with whom the whole of life is opening up before him, whose career is destined to be one of huge fame and success and glory? I always think of Wilde when I come to New York, funnily enough. It's not as if he wrote much about. He did a little in the Picture of Dorian Gray, and he was very interested in America and wrote a lot about America. But the image I use is that when I started to become well known in Britain, I was invited to give talks to universities and colleges and things. And sometimes the head of the society would invite me back to their rooms for some wine or coffee or whatever. And in the beginning, one noticed they had the usual posters on the wall. You might say Karl Marx and Jimi Hendrix, Che Guevara, that sort of thing, because students believed that the world was going to be set free by politics and rock and roll. And then I noticed as the 90s proceeded, that there would be photographs, there would be posters far more likely of Einstein and Oscar Wilde, and the fall of the Berlin Wall and the crass commercialization of music, the killing of Lennon and all these other things. People know, I don't think students believe anymore that rock and roll is going to free the world, or that revolutionary politics will, but they think perhaps the life of the mind will solve the problems of the world, and that's art and science together. And the one thing I just wanted to add, why I really always think of Wilde in New York, is, you know, if you get a good cab run down Fifth Avenue and you get late at night and all the lights are green, you pass 34th and you see the Empire State Building, and then if you turn your head round to the parcel shelf of the cab, it very quickly disappears because buildings nearer than it appear to be larger. It's that sort of parallax effect. And in 1900, when Wilde died, in 1902 and 1903, he was like a forgotten person. But I think of history now as us speeding down towards Union Square. And because you get this fantastic effect, and do try it on Fifth Avenue if you've not, which is at night when you've got a run of green, is just look out and keep looking, and you will suddenly see the Empire State Building doing this, like Saturn V, just rising and rising and rising and rising, as all the buildings that were nearer that are pygmies are revealed as true pygmies, and it is revealed in its true size. And I think over the last 100 years since his death, that's happened with Wilde.